is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Oteli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. Rescuers brave freezing conditions to find survivors still trapped beneath the rubble in quake-hit Tibet. Why are the first 72 hours so critical? An expert breaks it down. South Korea's acting president is urging authorities to use maximum restraint as hundreds of protesters continue their blockade of Yoon Suk Yeol's residence ahead of another possible attempt to arrest the impeached leader. Now, China widens its consumer trade-in program in the latest bid to rev up sluggish consumer spending and cushion possible blows from higher U.S. tariffs this year. And the world's largest maker of memory chips and smartphones, Samsung warns fourth quarter profit will miss forecasts as it struggles to meet increasing demand for AI chips.
It's quite clear that we were just there to assert our rights. We were not threatening any particular country, and I don't think there was nothing there that could be seen as illegal.
Also in East Asia tonight, CNA speaks exclusively with Philippine Foreign Minister Enrique Manalo on Manila's tensions with Beijing over the contested South China Sea. Rescuers are racing against time and battling freezing temperatures as they search for survivors of yesterday's earthquake in China's Tibet Autonomous Region. More than 400 people have been rescued, but authorities believe that many more are still trapped under the rubble. The official death toll remains unchanged since last night at 126 people, and 188 others have been injured. Now, the quake caused extensive damage, destroying more than 3,600 homes and displacing some 30,000 residents. Temporary shelters have been set up as temperatures in the area plunged to as low as minus 11 degrees Celsius. Emergency supplies, including tents, quilts, and generators, have been rushed to affected areas. Roads damaged by the quake have also been reopened to ensure aid delivery. Now, Chinese President Xi Jinping has ordered an all-out rescue effort. More than 12,000 personnel have been deployed, including soldiers, firefighters, and professional rescuers. Some of the lucky ones pulled from the rubble include children and the elderly, but those who remain trapped face severe risks of hypothermia due to the freezing conditions. The magnitude 6.8 quake struck yesterday morning near Tingri County in Shigatse, a region that's home to 800,000 people. It was one of the strongest tremors to hit the quake-prone area in recent years, with the impact felt as far away as Nepal, Bhutan, and India. And for more insights, we are joined now by Wei Shengzi. He's Associate Professor from the Asian School of the Environment at Nanyang Technological University, and he is also Associate Chair of Research. Well, thanks for joining us this evening, Professor. First up, perhaps help our viewers understand, in such disaster situations, why are the first 72 hours so critical?
You know, that earthquakes can shake down those buildings or infrastructures. So when people are buried down in these rubbles, it is very pressing to rescue them as early as possible. You know that when 3 days pass, a person without food or water supply, the chances to survive is getting smaller and smaller.
That's right. I mean, survival rates on the ground affected. We're talking about, minus 16 degrees overnight, that sort of a temperature. I want to talk about those who are displaced, though, because President Xi has called for all-out effort to help them. At this point, we know that 3,600 homes are destroyed. So I imagine that rehousing those people will be a big challenge. But what are some of the immediate concerns to attend to?
I think at this time to rescue people from these breaking down rubbles is the most important thing. At the same time, the rescue team should also pay attention to the aftershocks. It's quite common that this kind of big earthquake going to be followed by certain amount of aftershocks. Some of the aftershocks could be quite strong and produce strong shaking as well. So rescuing people from these disaster-affected regions is critical at the moment. And after that, of course, building the new houses for people living there is the things to do in the following steps. But at the moment, it's the most important to rescue as many people as possible.
So, Professor, when you talk about these aftershocks being a concern, I mean, are we looking at possibly another earthquake or aftershock that could be a magnitude 5 or larger? I mean, is that a concern?
In general, when there's a magnitude 6 earthquake, it's going to be followed by a few magnitude 5 earthquakes. So it is quite common, based on the global observations, that this magnitude 7.1 earthquake based on the USGS report will be followed by a few magnitude 5 plus aftershocks. So this kind of aftershocks can still generate pretty strong shaking. So it's important to pay attention to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And not to mention that power and water in the region, that's an issue because it's difficult. It's difficult to reach that because of the roads, the infrastructure and all that have been disrupted. So how do you think authorities can sort of ensure that people have access to the most basic needs, you know, like food, water, medical care, that sort of thing?
I think based on the message from the central government, as you can see that there's multiple rescue teams has been sent into the disaster region, the shaking affected region. I believe with the strong effort from the central government, they're gonna do their best job to supply food, water, and other necessary materials to the disaster region.
Perhaps can you elaborate a little bit more about the area, because the entire plateau is seismically active, right? That is an active region, isn't it?
Yes, we know that the Tibetan Plateau has been uplifted because of the collision between the Indian plate and the Eurasian plate. So as the plateau is getting higher and higher, is the gravity going to drag the internal of the plateau to extend horizontally. So this earthquake is caused by the horizontally extension stress loading rather than the collision. So this place, along with the other north-south oriented faults in southern part of Tibet, has experienced this type of earthquakes in the past. So from a scientific point of view, it is not surprised this earthquake take place there. But because this is a relatively remote area, the infrastructure quality, the monitoring of seismic events may not be as good as the other more populated area where denser network monitoring is available.
So you've mentioned that, I mean, obviously the priority now is rescue efforts, try and search for survivors beneath the rubble. We're still looking out for aftershocks. But in the meantime, after that, we're talking about rebuilding efforts. And just very quickly, Professor, I'm wondering what are some of the priorities for these authorities and architects to ensure that the new buildings can withstand future earthquakes?
Well, from hazard mitigation point of view, first of all, scientists and engineers should try to come out with a more accurate hazard map. With this kind of hazard map, for example, where are the location of active faults and how fast these faults are loaded, and then a kind of different kind of hazard zones can be divided, can be determined. And based on these kind of scientific facts or numbers, the building quality or building code can be designed accordingly. And if the buildings are built based on the hazard map, I think the chances that the people are going to be safer in the future events will be there.
All right. Well, it's been great talking to you. Thanks very much for your insights. Wei Shengji from Nanyang Technological University. Well, China is expanding the rollout of measures to boost wheat consumption in the world's second largest economy. Authorities broadened a home appliance trade-in program to include a dozen categories, up from last year's 8. The government last year had vowed to ramp up support for consumers to improve livelihoods and revive slowing economic growth.
延续2024年的好的经验和做法。2025年呢，加力扩围实施两性政策呢，我们目前的总体考虑是这样的： 要增加资金规模，扩大支持范围，优化实施机制，放大撬动效应，深入推进4大行动。
And for more, CNA's Tan Yuguan joins us live from Shanghai. So, Yuguan, what has the reaction been from consumers that you have spoken to? Are they biting it?
Well, we did go down on the streets to catch the men on the street during lunch hour. And it seems that many of them might have already bought their appliances in the last round of subsidies. Many indicated that they may not buy some more appliances or digital products unless they actually need to. Let's take a listen as to what they have to say.
我已经买过了，因为利用这个政策买了空调，挺好的。感谢政府。
原本是外地先有15%的，上海还没开始吧？就这2礼拜应该是。
今天刚刚发布说上海开始了，那您在新年会有什么样的计划吗？
换手机吧。
还有其他的吗？
该换的家电需要就换，不会额外去消费。
我觉得应该会刺激到更多的消费，对，希望有更多好的产品考虑到。当然，平时自己消费的时候也不会说非常盲目的，只是因为价格的元素去考虑。但是我觉得它肯定是一个很重要的一个要素。所以如果再有好的产品，我觉得应该会有帮助。对，
我打算买台相机啊，就是说价格比下来的话，哪个便宜我就用哪个折扣加补贴呗。
你要了真的会买，你不需要那确实不会。
肯定还是必需品，就是购买为主。如果说不是必需品的话，可能也不会去过多的消费。
From the sounds of it, Yuguan, mixed bag of reaction. People are not spending unless it's absolutely necessary. So, in a nutshell, do you think these measures are actually sufficient to boost domestic consumption?
Yes, indeed, the reactions are pretty mixed there. But one thing we need to take note, though, is the fact that today's announcement by the central government will take a while to trickle down to the provinces, to the various platforms. And we did check some e-commerce platforms today, and we did see that the digital products that are now included in this round of subsidies, they actually have not appeared on the portal meant for this subsidy program. Of course, there must be a reason why the central government is relying on this policy tool again. Official numbers did show that previous rounds of subsidies did spur an uptick in consumer consumption, in consumption numbers. According to this morning's news release, or rather this morning's news conference, and also previous announcements, after the introduction of previous rounds of subsidies for electronics and appliances, national sales of household appliances and audiovisual equipment did see an uptick. It changed from a year-on-year decrease in July of minus 2.4% in July to a year-on-year increase of 3.4% in August. Now, the year-on-year growth went into double-digit territory in September to November, hitting as high as 39.2% year-on-year in October, and above 20% for all 3 months, September to November. Now, the subsidies for industrial upgrading as well also spurred 7.6% growth in investment in manufacturing equipment. Oteli?
Hey, thanks very much for those numbers. CNA's Tan Yuguan there live from Shanghai. Well, let's also quickly take a look at the mainland equities' reaction to the latest stimulus efforts. Markets don't appear to be greatly impressed, but managed to pare early steep losses. Shanghai ended in the green zone after a volatile session, while Shenzhen closed nearly 0.5% in the red. Hong Kong ended about 1% lower. Well, analysts note that the sentiment also remains subdued amid geopolitical tensions. South Korea's acting president, Sang-mok, is urging authorities to do their best to avoid clashes with citizens as they prepare to make a second attempt to arrest impeached President Yoon Suk Yeol over his martial law decree. Hundreds of Yoon supporters have gathered near his residence, vowing to protect their leader. Anti-Yoon protesters are rallying nearby as well, separated by police fences. The main opposition Democratic Party has filed a complaint against Mr. Che, saying that he should have ordered the president's security team to stand down when investigators tried to arrest Mr. Yoon last Friday.
경호처에 대한 지휘 책임을 지고 있는 최상목 고라대행이 있습니다. 최상목 고라대행의 우선 과제는 나라 정상화입니다. 고로 윤석열의 체포영장 집행에 대한 불개입은 내란 동조이며 직무유기입니다. 지금 당장 고랑 대인직에서 끌어내려 내란 동조범으로 처벌해야 마땅합니다.
The Presidential Security Service has been fortifying Mr. Yoon's residence with layers of barbed wire and using buses to block access to the hillside villa. Mr. Yoon's legal team earlier dismissed rumors that the leader has fled his official residence in Seoul. They say he is willing to accept a court-issued arrest warrant, provided it is procedurally sound. His legal team says that Mr. Yoon will accept trial if he is prosecuted, but his lawyers reject what they call an illegal investigation, saying that this will set a precedent. The chief of the anti-corruption agency leading the probe against Yoon has apologized for the failed arrest attempt last week. Mr. Oh Dong-woon responded to criticism on being ill-equipped to execute the warrant, saying the team will now prepare thoroughly with the understanding that it could be their last opportunity. Coming up next on East Asia tonight, Tencent makes biggest buyback in nearly 2 decades as it looks to minimize the fallout from a recent U.S. blacklisting. Plus, uncertainty about U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's industrial policy weighing on automakers. Now, Honda says it will be cautious about starting production of new EVs. Hello again. Good to have your company on East Asia tonight. Well, it is time now for business news with Roland Lim. And Roland, it appears that Samsung's troubles are far from over. In fact, the crisis it mentioned in an apology in October looks set to be deepening.
That's right, Oteli. The world's biggest memory chip maker, as well as smartphone maker, struggling to catch up with industry rivals that supply high-end AI chips. And that's led to an issue of disappointing earnings outlook for the final months of 2024. Samsung says its fourth quarter operating profit will likely come in at $4.5 billion, falling below market expectations at $6.2 billion. Sales for the 3 months period also missed estimates. Samsung says its lackluster preliminary earnings was due to weak demand for conventional memory chips for personal computers and mobile phones, as well as rising competition in the sector. The tech firm raked in its largest sales of memory chips in the fourth quarter, but profit for the division, well, that fell due to higher costs for R&D. Investor focus is on its AI chip business as the South Korean company fights to keep up with smaller rivals like SK Hynix and Micron in the lucrative market for more advanced chips. Samsung's full financial statement with the breakdowns for each division is due out later this month. Investors, though, are shrugging off the lackluster numbers. Shares of Samsung ending the day, 3.4% in the green. The boost coming from NVIDIA's presentation at the Consumer Electronics Show overnight, generating fresh buzz for the sector. South Korea's leading home appliance maker, LG Electronics, too, issuing a dismal outlook for its fourth quarter profit, despite a record annual revenue. In a preliminary earnings report, LG Electronics says its operating profit could come in at around $100.4 million for the October to December period. And that's down sharply from the $214 million a year earlier. Revenue is expected to have edged 0.2% higher to nearly $15.5 billion. For the full year, LG Electronics is expected to post a record high revenue of some $60 billion, but operating profit is seen to be declining 6.1%. The South Korean company cites unexpected rises in shipping and one-off costs as one of the main reasons weighing on profits. The firm's TV and EV businesses also experienced sluggish demand. But its flagship home appliance business, that displayed strong performance and is expected to post annual sales of over 30 trillion won for the second consecutive year. LG's final earnings report will be released later this month. Honda says it is cautious about producing new electric vehicles as uncertainty lingers about President-elect Donald Trump's industrial policy. The words of Honda's top executive echo a global business vigilance ahead of Donald Trump's inauguration later this month. The Japanese automaker is also cautious about its battery plant plans in Canada owing to global trends. Speaking at the CES Technology Conference in Las Vegas, Honda's executive VP said that they might have to delay the production of the EV models. The automaker has so far invested significantly in EVs, including an aim to sell only electric and fuel cell vehicles by 2040. The comeback of Trump complicates the EV transition plans and America's business, of Honda, along with other global car makers like General Motors and Stellantis. Tech giant Tencent has made its biggest share buyback in almost 20 years, following a sell-off caused by the tech firm's addition to a U.S. blacklist for alleged links with the Chinese military. China's most valuable company repurchased nearly 4 million shares worth around $193 million in a single day. Experts say the move signals urgency as the company attempts to contain the fallout from the U.S. blacklist, despite denying the allegations. Now, while Tencent shares are the most purchased stock today, the firm was not the biggest buyer. Chinese investors snapped up some $1.8 billion worth of shares during the sell-off via exchange links with Hong Kong. Tencent shares ending the day 2.7% lower after falling more than 7% in yesterday's trading slump. A technology industry group has urged President Joe Biden's administration to refrain from issuing a last-minute rule that would control global access to AI chips. It has warned the restrictions would jeopardize U.S. leadership in artificial intelligence. Though the rule could come as soon as Friday, it would place arbitrary constraints on U.S. companies' ability to sell computing systems overseas. The Information Technology Industry Council, or ITI, represents companies like Amazon, Microsoft, and Meta. It says the rule would push American companies to cede the global market to competitors. The ITI has written a letter to U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo criticizing the administration's insistence on publishing the rule in the final days of Joe Biden's presidency. Industry opposition to the expected rule has become increasingly blunt and public. More market action declines on Wall Street overnight, and U.S. inflation fears casting a shadow over markets in Japan, South Korea. The Nikkei 225 slipping 0.26%. Tech shares leading the decliners there. And the yen is also hovering at 150 level to the dollar. That's an intervention level last seen in July. South Korean shares ending the day higher by 1.2%, gaining for the fourth straight session. Heavyweight Samsung Electronics leading the winners. And the Korean won also weakening against the dollar bill. And that'll do it for business. We'll tell it back to you.
Thanks so very much, Roland. Well, we're going to go for another short break. But coming up, CNA's Leong Wai-kit speaks exclusively to the Philippines Foreign Affairs Secretary about how Manila intends to handle its territorial disputes with Beijing over the South China Sea. And we look into the growth of what's called minilateralism in the Indo-Pacific, when small groups of nations come together to pursue mutual goals amid deepening power rivalry. We'll be speaking with an expert for more insights in just a moment. This is East Asia Tonight. Rescuers are braving freezing conditions to find survivors in quake-hit Tibet. More than 400 people have been rescued, but authorities believe many more are still trapped. The death toll stands at 126. China widens its consumer trade-in program in the latest bid to rev up sluggish consumer spending and cushion possible blows from higher U.S. tariffs this year. And South Korea's acting president urges authorities to use maximum restraint as hundreds of protesters continue their blockade of Yoon Suk Yeol's residence ahead of another attempt to arrest the impeached leader. Now, Lim Yoon Suk has more on what we can expect from the potential second attempt to detain President Yoon.
You know, now that the anti-corruption agency has received this new court warrant to detain impeached President Yoon Suk Yeol, it is believed to be working with the police forces to come up with various ways and the best way to execute this arrest warrant. And it wants to make sure it is successful this time, since it did fail to do so in its first attempt last week when it was blocked by the Presidential Security Service, which says its duty is to protect the country's president. And until the Constitutional Court makes a decision on whether to strike down or hold up this impeachment motion that was passed by Parliament last month, the duty of the Presidential Service is to protect President Yoon Suk Yeol, and it says it will continue to do so. And that's why there are mounting concerns that there could be a clash between the Presidential Security Service and the anti-corruption agency when the agency tries to go in to arrest President Yoon. Now, the head of the Presidential Security Service, Park Jong-jun, has been summoned to appear for questioning by police on allegations he blocked the investigators from trying to arrest President Yoon last week, but he has not done so yet. And, you know, since that first failed attempt, members of the Presidential Security Service have been installing barbed wires near the gate and along the hills leading up to the presidential compound. And there are reports saying that the police are considering all available options this time, including the deployment of SWAT teams. And so it is a worrying situation here. And, you know, in fact, there were several protesters calling for President Yoon to be arrested gathered outside the government office in Seoul, where Finance Minister Sang-mok is carrying out his duties as the acting president, and they're calling on him to order the Presidential Security Service to step down and make way for these anti-corruption agency members to be able to go into the presidential residence and also arrest him. Now, meanwhile, the pro-Yoon supporters and also those against him have again camped outside the presidential residence, and both sides are saying that they will continue to stay there. For pro-Yoon supporters, they say they will stay there until President Yoon is reinstated into office, and for anti-Yoon protesters, they say until the anti-corruption agency will be able to go in, arrest President Yoon Suk Yeol for declaring the short-lived martial law on December 3rd.
The Philippines Foreign Affairs Secretary says that viewing the South China Sea dispute through the prism of U.S.-China competition could be an impediment to improving ties between Beijing and Manila. China and the Philippines have seen more frequent clashes in the waters where both have competing claims. Beijing has also been angered by Manila's growing military cooperation with Washington in the region, which it views as external interference. Speaking in an exclusive interview with CNA's Leong Wai-kit, Enrique Manalo defended Manila's strategy of assertive transparency, and this involves embedding media during Philippine Coast Guard missions and reporting what it describes as aggressive Chinese activities.
Well, I think the transparency is merely meant to show the truth, what is happening. Because if we didn't show that, then one side will say this, another side. It's quite clear what's happening. And it's quite clear that we were just there to assert our rights. We were not threatening any particular country. And I don't think there was nothing there that could be seen as illegal. All we were trying to do in some cases is resupply our troops on the ship or guide our fishermen. Yet we were subject to harassment, intimidation, and even collisions and water cannons. So the best way to show our point is to publicize it without any, showing the facts as they are. So that's been our intention, because it's merely to show that we are merely practicing our legal rights. And we did not start whatever confrontation happened. But again, we're willing to discuss this and see how we can manage these tensions and events so they don't get out of hand. But still, we have to prove our point and show it.
Can I ask, how much of a factor are these long-standing issues with China, especially with South China Sea, that would play on the overall assessment of ties between both sides?
Well, I see the tendency of China sometimes is to try and view whatever happens between Philippines and China in the prism of the U.S.-China competition. And sometimes this view does not help, because if the Philippines isn't undertaking our efforts, for example, in the EEZ, because of the United States, we're simply trying to assert our rights under law. And if something happens because, let's say, Chinese actions against us, it really becomes a bilateral issue. It's not because of the United States. So I think that in a way could be an impediment in trying to improve it, our bilateral relationship, which, by the way, is still quite strong on the economic front. I'm really talking more on the South China Sea. But that doesn't help to view these incidents in the prism of the U.S.-China rivalry. They should be viewed in terms of Philippine-China relations and how we can try to improve them.
The Quad nations of the US, Japan, India and Australia will conduct their first ever joint Coast Guard drills this month. Well, a separate exercise between the US, Japan and the Philippines is also reportedly planned for March. The drills come amid a perceived rise in China's assertiveness in the region and highlight a trend towards a so-called minilateralism or cooperation between smaller groups of countries in the face of power rivalry in the Indo-Pacific. And for more insights, let's bring in Ridwan Rahmat. He's the principal defense analyst at defense consultancy firm Janes. So, Ridwan, in the Indo-Pacific, as we've mentioned, we've seen a real surge in minilateralism, referring to smaller groupings of countries. What exactly is driving this trend, and how do you see it redefining a regional security cooperation?
Yes, you're right, Otel. There's a lot of traction in recent years, where multilateralism has gained a bit more popularity. And I think this is a reflection of the misalignment in objectives, in inclinations between countries in this region. I mean, just take a look at ASEAN, for example. ASEAN, a coalition of 10 countries, is very much a house divided, even on simple issues such as the South China Sea. You know, in the past, when we had broad-based military exercises, some of these countries were not even able to agree on where to hold the exercises. We've got some countries who would like to have it in the South China Sea, but there are certain countries who are very wary of offending China in case the exercises are seen as provocative. So I think whenever there is a misalignment in goals such as this, I think it drives these countries towards smaller, more efficient arrangements in which the alignments can be more adjusted to the objectives of these member states.
So take the Quad, for example, Rids. Experts saying, that they'll be holding these joint Coast Guard drills to strengthen the Indo-Pacific maritime security signals. And this also is sort of like a shift towards gray zone tactics. That's what some experts are saying. I'm curious to know, do you see it that way as well? And if so, how significant is this shift?
Yeah, so this is one of the drawbacks of the so-called rise in minilateralism, and the major drawback is like what you mentioned. It has the potential to be perceived or to alienate the countries that are non-participating in these arrangements, especially if the military exercises are being done very close to the country. I think one very clear example that I might mention as a recent example is the trilateral engagement between Japan, South Korea, and the US. This is a multilateral arrangement that has come up because of concerns over North Korea's missile program. But I think it raised a lot of alarm bells in China, who also saw the arrangements, the exercises as being targeted against Beijing. So I think this is a major drawback. It has the potential to heighten tensions further, where already the region as it is already a powder keg, given the overlapping maritime territorial claims that we are seeing today.
And that's a great point you've mentioned there. We are seeing the security landscape evolving. And I'm wondering, of course, we also have new challenges to do with cybersecurity, counterterrorism. And do you see minilateralism adapting to address these new challenges?
Yes, I think one of the major advantages of a minilateral arrangement is exactly what you mentioned. It is smaller. It consists of a much smaller group of policymakers. And as such, it is able to better respond to emerging threats that are on the horizon, especially now if you were to look at how fast warfare is changing. In Ukraine, we've got first-person drones, we've got autonomous vehicles. These are all concepts that needs to be adapted into military engagements and exercises. And I'm not sure if the large multilateral exercises can adapt as quickly as the minilateral ones that we are seeing. So I think in the context of a more uncertain future, a more complex threat environment, I think multilateral exercises and arrangements are going to gain even more traction in the near future.
Which is what I want to touch on, because China's got its own brand of multilateralism, Belt and Road Initiative, BRICS, RCEP, etc. How do you think that differs from how the US approaches things?
I think what the US builds its multilateral and minilateral arrangements is existing capabilities. For example, the US cannot operate or will have limited ability to operate with a partners that does not have the technical competency, the kind of military hardware that the Americans themselves are using. So for example, if you were to request a certain type of military activity with the Americans, for example, a Southeast Asian country would like to request an engagement in anti-submarine warfare, that cannot be done because the Americans are very not very agnostic. The kind of military equipment that they use, some of the military technology is still very secret, very proprietary, and the Americans are not willing to share such things with countries that it may not be aligned with. So we're seeing a different approach by China when it comes to exercises like this, especially with countries that are aligned with it. They are a bit more open to sharing such information. And I think this is one of the major differences in how the two powers approach minilateralism.
And earlier when we talked about grey zone tactics and then the downsides of minilateralism. And just to follow up on that, actually, also, are you worried that it could possibly create this patchwork of exclusive clubs, rather than promoting broader regional cooperation? Is that a concern?
Yeah, one of the things that I'm actually quite worried about is in a situation like where you are relying on one or two big power patrons for your military exercises and capability building, I think you're going to be creating a lot of over-dependence on that particular patron in the near future. And for years to come. Because if you were to look at how geopolitics is changing, for example, we're having a shift in leadership in the Americans. They are changing their president very soon. And with that change comes a different change in temperament also. So what are the kind of policies that will carry on from the Biden administration to the Trump administration? Will he be as engaged in the region as his predecessor? We're not sure about that. So the moment this kind of reliance is getting too heavy, I think a lot of Southeast Asian countries may have this particular disadvantage. They may find that this over-reliance does not come with continuity, and this puts a lot of their military exercising programs, a lot of their drill programs, put that into they will be a bit more unknown in the future.
Very interesting insights. Really enjoyed that conversation. Thanks so much. Ridwan Rahmat, Principal Analyst from defense consultancy firm Janes. In other news, Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba will visit Malaysia and Indonesia from tomorrow in a 4-day trip that aims to bolster defense ties. CNA's Michio Ishida has more.
Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba is seeking to build stronger ties with Southeast Asia. He heads to Malaysia, the current ASEAN chair, on Thursday. And after that, he will make a trip to Indonesia, the most populous country in the regional bloc. Mr. Ishiba's goal during his visit is to step up defense and security cooperation with the Southeast Asian nations, in particular with Indonesia. He's hoping the countries can hold a 2+2 meeting of defense and foreign ministers this year. Mr. Ishiba's interest in building closer defense ties comes on the back of China's growing assertiveness in maritime claims, which are also disputed by some ASEAN countries. This is Mr. Ishiba's first visit to Muslim-majority countries since taking office in October. Mr. Ishiba is believed to be keen to understand the positions of Malaysia and Indonesia, which have responded differently from Japan to conflicts such as in the Middle East and Ukraine. Japan supports Ukraine and has imposed sanctions on Russia. And on the Israel-Hamas war, Japan takes a balanced position. During his visit, Mr. Ishiba will also seek to establish personal relations with Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim and Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto. That's as U.S. President-elect Donald Trump returns to the White House this month, leading to some uneasiness about what this could mean for the region. During Trump's first term in office, Japan tried to serve as a bridge of communication between the U.S. and ASEAN, a role that Mr. Ishiba may be hoping to play. Michio Ishida, CNA, Tokyo.
Coming up next on East Asia tonight, we'll be unveiling some of the latest tech innovations at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. And fancy a disco party in freezing weather? Well, we'll join the crowd in one of China's coldest towns. Thai police have released images of a missing Chinese actor found in Myanmar. They say Wang Xing was told about a casting call in Thailand, but was instead trafficked across the border and trained to scam other Chinese people. Well, the actor was found yesterday and returned to Thailand. He went missing in a Thai province called Tak on the border with Myanmar. The area is known for online fraud factories and human trafficking by criminal gangs. The UN says hundreds of thousands of people have been trafficked to work in scam centers in these border towns. Wang's case went viral on Chinese social media. Well, Thailand is concerned that it could hurt its tourism industry at a time when it's working hard to win back Chinese tourist dollars.
นายชิงเนี่ยได้ใช้ WeChat พูดคุยกับทางคนจีนด้วยกันซึ่งใน WeChat เนี่ยเมื่อกี้ผมดูนะครับเขาก็จะเขียนว่าคำว่า GMM Gammy แล้วก็เป็นชื่อของคนจีนซึ่งก็เป็นลักษณะใครก็ได้ที่ตั้งชื่อขึ้นมานะครับซึ่งเจ้าตัวนายชิงเองก็ไม่ได้รู้จักว่า GMM Gammy คืออะไรนะครับเพียงแต่ว่าคนที่กล่าวอ้างที่เป็นคนจีนเนี่ยก็ได้อ้างว่าจะพามาแคสติ้งที่เมืองไทยนะครับ
Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has met members of Nihon Hidankyo, a grassroots movement of atomic bomb survivors, after the group received the Nobel Peace Prize. Mr. Ishiba congratulated the group's efforts towards creating a world free of nuclear weapons. Well, this year marks the 80th anniversary of the 1945 U.S. atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the final days of World War II.
被爆の実相、これを世界に向けて発信してもらった皆様からこの度ノーベル平和賞により大変な栄誉をお受けになりました。このことについては我々としても極めて意義深いというふうに考えているところでございます。
But one of the group's leaders expressed disappointment, saying there was not enough time for deeper discussion with the Prime Minister, and from their perspective, that talks were not productive.
だから総理が日本のむしろ総理の個人の防衛それから安全保障に関する考え方等々をいろいろ話をしてそれに反論する時間は設けられていなかったので別の機会に私はそういう時間を作ってもらわないといけないかなというふうに思っております。
170 million American TikTok users may have to say goodbye to their beloved app in less than 2 weeks. The Chinese-owned app is set to be banned in the U.S. unless it's divested from its owners. Could there be a change in course? In this week's CNA Correspondent podcast, CNA's Teresa Tang asks Washington correspondent Benji Haya what happens next and why Mr. Trump changed his tune on TikTok.
Mr. Trump was the leader who first put a ban on the table back in 2020. So my question to you is, why is he now so keen to keep it around?
Yeah, he's gone through quite a transformation here. And I've just come back off the end of covering the 2024 presidential campaign, which Donald Trump won, of course. And so I saw a lot of him. And what I've realized is he's an unpredictable man. It can be complicated to work out where he sits on a certain issue. For me, though, I think on TikTok, it's actually pretty clear cut because the app served him really well during the election, you know, getting the sort of bro vote, as it's known, young men especially, to engage in his campaign. I think overall, though, this is my theory, which is Donald Trump just likes being popular. right? He has a warm spot in his heart for TikTok. And I think the bottom line is just like he just enjoys the positive attention that TikTok has granted him. He has the unfettered ability to spread his message to 14, 15 million followers. So from Trump's perspective, never mind those pesky national security concerns, which, he raised in the past, but those don't matter now. TikTok is good for me. I like TikTok. Let's keep TikTok.
You can catch the rest of that episode and other behind-the-scenes conversations with our global team of reporters on our podcast, CNA Correspondent. It's available on our website, CNA or Me Listen apps, as well as on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. The world's largest technology showcase, CES, has opened its doors to the public, and thousands of people descended on Las Vegas to interact with the latest tech innovations, including fancy robots, flashy cars, and advanced AI creations.
It's actually pretty amazing. It feels like I might be a little behind in technology, just seeing the new innovation and amazing stuff that's coming out in gaming, TVs, it's wild. It's actually kind of crazy.
Well, here are some highlights. German car maker BMW has revealed its new panoramic iDrive user interface that it hopes will become the standard dashboard display for new models. It will be released later this year. And clinching the CES 2025 Best Innovation Award, the Bookstory AI app scans books and reads any chosen page aloud. It's able to translate the text it reads into any language in real time. Well, this lifelike robotic puppy, not quite actually, it's called Genie, and it may be a new source of comfort for those seeking companions. Created by Tombot for dementia sufferers, the yellow Labrador puppy responds to touch and voice commands. It even wags its tail. And before we go, dancing in snowfall sounds like a cool idea, but would you do it if it's minus 30 degrees Celsius? I might actually be among these hundreds who braved the extreme cold to party at the snow disco in China's Heilongjiang province. All that moving must help to keep them warm and burn some calories as well. And the finale was a fireworks display that lit up the sky and kept the visitors in a trance.
就是在这么冷的天蹦迪在野外，很多人在一起，它非常的嗨，就是非常适合年轻人。然后当蹦迪结束的时候，转身的那一刻烟花就会让你想到家。
刚才跟我老婆都在说啊，这个看出这个咱们哈尔滨人这个热情，这虽说这个天是冷的，这个这心是热的，非常非常嗨。刚才我女儿也在蹦得好开心。
Well, I hope you enjoyed tonight's edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia and look us up Facebook or on YouTube. Thanks for watching.